Welcome to Story Hill Church this morning. If we haven't met, my name is Evan Kaler. I'm one of the worship leaders here. You might notice there's no one else here. That's because all of our college students are gone at the Salt Company Conference this weekend in Des Moines, Iowa. So we're missing like 120 people. But normally, we're going to have a great time anyways. So if you guys want to stand up, and I'm just going to read a quick call to worship, and then we're going to get singing. Exodus 15:26 says, God invites us into his healing presence with these words, I am the Lord who heals you. Isaiah 6:10 says, diseased, depressed, dysfunctional, defeated, we come hungering for health that only God can provide. And God calls us to bring open eyes, hearing ears, and tender hearts turned toward him, the great physician. So let's sing this morning with humble hearts as we enter into his presence. Says this is the message that we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with him, yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live by the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, purifies us from all sin. Here at Story Hill, we like to take a moment every service to recognize that we are not perfect, that there was only ever one perfect person who lived, and that was Jesus. And 1 John 1 says that the blood of him, God's own son, purifies us from our sin. And so there'll be some words on the screen that we're going to read together, just corporately coming together and confessing our need for Jesus this morning. And so would you read them with me? Glorious God, we confess before you the sin of being underwhelmed by who you are. Your glory doesn't captivate us, and reveal your glory to us again, that we might see it together and rejoice through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Let's continue to worship.
I've carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. I see it now, I'm laying it down. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I'll run to the Father again.
Well, good morning, Story Hill Church. My name is Aaron. I'm the lead pastor here, and it is so good to be worshiping with our church family this morning. If you came in after we kind of started this morning, you may notice that some of our younger college students are not here today. There's not been a mass exodus or anything like that. All of our college students are or the majority of them, and if you're a college student, you're like, I'm here, like, we are so glad you're here. So, but a lot of our college students, over 100 of them, are in Des Moines, Iowa right now for our annual Salt Company Conference. And if you're wondering, like, what is the Salt Company Conference? So, Story Hill Church is part of a network of churches that are committed to seeing healthy churches in university cities and towns and, centers and things like that. We are a church that seeks to be multi-generational, that wants to love the next generation and continue to share the gospel with those that are, advancing in life, growing up, all those kind of things. And so there's about 20 plus churches that are now inside of our network, and that number is growing every single year. Here's just a short little video of some of the, pride that we all have about, like, Jayhawks and Minnesota. Like, here, you'll see some flags flying. I mean, these are, like, a lot of universities represented. So this happened Friday night. Sorry for the glitching technology. But there are over 4,000 college students in Des Moines right now. It's truly amazing, truly. Here's another picture of just, all of us worshiping King Jesus together. And it's an incredible, sweet moment because it's not like just another conference. And I don't want to throw digs at any conferences. I've been to things like Passion and things like that in Atlanta, and those are incredible. But what's unique about this is that all of these 4,000 students that have gathered together are all there as one unified family, even though some of us wear, our Jayhawk gear and someone else wears, Mizzou or, Iowa State, and you name it, but we're all there on one unified vision, and we're leaving there, so they'll leave today and go back to their cities, and it's all one family on one mission together, spread out across the United States, and honestly, the globe. So here is a picture of the United States, and you'll see the pink dots are places that we already have an established church that's, multi-generational church to reach the next generation, okay? You can see in Kansas, there's Story Hill, and we even have all the way down to Gainesville, Florida, all the way up to East Lansing, Michigan, all the way over to Fort Collins, and everywhere in between. And if you'll also notice, there are, and it might be a little hard to see, but there's some green dots on there, and those are new churches that are going to be started this coming fall and next fall as well. So you see places like UFC, University, or UCF, University of Central Florida, in Orlando down there, Eugene, Oregon. Do we have any Oregonians in here? And then Greeley, Colorado, Bloomington, Normal, Illinois, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and one of my close friends that I went to college with is going all the way to Syracuse, New York. And I hear they get, like, the amount of snow that we got this past Thursday, they get that like every other week for like 3 or 4 months. So he's going to a different place for sure. So that's just a short little, synopsis of what we are a part of and the vision that we are behind. And it's just been an incredible weekend together with our college students. I know they're having the best time, and they're going to come back super energized to see us love our city and our campus even more. And so if you are just now joining us, maybe it's your first time ever here, we have been walking several weeks now through the New Testament book of Mark, okay? One of the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And this is an eyewitness account of Jesus' life, and we are in chapter 8 together this morning. So the first 7 chapters of Mark honestly can be summarized by just who is Jesus. Mark's just giving us like, hey, here's who he is. Like, this is who he is and what he's here for, and this is what he's here for you for, and this is some of the things he's done, the truth that he shares, and his heart. But chapter 8 takes this transition. The first 7.5 chapters have really encapsulated the 3 years of Jesus' ministry. So, I mean, like, think about it, 7 chapters, 3 years. And things start to slow down now in chapter 8 as Jesus heads to the cross, okay? And so we're going to see a little bit of that transition here, but I want to go ahead and just, reveal what's happening. Chapter 8 answers 2 critical questions for us, okay? The first, what does it mean to be a fully committed disciple of Jesus, a Christian? Like, what does that mean to be a Christian? Second, what stands in the way of you, if you're not a Christian, of you being fully committed, or if you are a Christian, this question is just as valuable. Like, what stands in the way of you continuing your growth and being fully committed to Jesus? Okay? Now, Jesus leans into the weight of discipleship in this. I'm super excited, so I'm just going to jump in to verse 1. You guys ready? Woo! Okay, verse 1. Here we go. Chapter 8, 1. In those days, there was again a large crowd, and they had nothing to eat. He called the disciples, his 12 students, and said to them, guys, I have compassion on the crowd because they've already stayed with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way, and some of them will have come a long distance. So in those days really connects what happened in the previous chapter to us starting chapter 7. And just to give you a short, tiny recap, Jesus had left the Jewish regions and he had entered into non-Jewish areas known as Gentile regions where everyone was not a Jew, okay? And so in those days when he was there, all right, he sees this massive crowd of people. They've been with him 3 days. And so what's about to happen is he's about to perform his second miracle of feeding thousands of people. There are some that confuse this with the first miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. This one is referred to as a feeding of the 4,000. They are 2 separate events. One was surrounded, primarily of Jewish people, and this one was primarily Gentile people. The feeding of the 5,000, they were only with Jesus about a day. This one, they've been with Jesus for over 3 days, and he's just like got compassion on them. So here's what happens. Verse 4. His disciples answer him. Man, I don't want to be too hard on these guys, but look, where can anyone get enough bread here in this desolate place to feed these people? Okay? Jesus says, how many loaves do you have? 7, they said. He commanded the crowd to sit down on the ground. Taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. So they served them to the crowd. Verse 7, they also had a few small fish, and after he had blessed them, he said these were to be served as well. They ate and were satisfied. Then they collected 7 large baskets of leftover pieces. Get this, about 4,000 were there. He dismissed them, and he immediately got into the boat with the disciples and went to the district of Dalmanutha. Now, I don't want to be too hard on the disciples, but even after seeing what Jesus did just days earlier with how Jesus fed over 5,000 people, these guys are they seem clueless. Jesus It's like, man, we got to feed these people. They're hungry. And they're just like, I know, Jesus, I don't know where we're going to get food. And he's like, okay, just have them sit down. Like, I got this. There's still a cluelessness there. And I'll be honest, I think that it's hard not to be numb in reading this. Just like, oh yeah, Jesus fed another 4,000 people. Cool, We were having dinner last week, and my wife, Kristen, she just made an amazing, simple meal with, fresh vegetables and stuff. And after dinner, she goes, isn't it just crazy how much work it goes in to just like making dinner? Like, you dirty everything in the kitchen, like to all this time to clean it up. Does anybody know okay, a few of you, great. And we just started this conversation of just like, man, but like think about like, decades ago or 100 years ago, like you would have had to commit like, we would have to commit our whole afternoon to making this happen. And I'm like holding a piece of broccoli and I'm like, we didn't even have to grow this. We just went to the store. And someone like plucked it off the tree for us or out of the ground or wherever broccolis grow, like this is, I know they come from the ground. Okay? Like this is incredible. And then it hit me like I didn't just speak this into existence. Like, yes, I could have spent a season growing it, harvesting it, preparing it, cooking it. And Jesus said, I got this. We cannot be numb to this incredible miracle. So the disciples have now witnessed this twice. Okay? Can you imagine? Wow. Verse 11. The Pharisees came and began to argue, so the critics are back, with him, Jesus, demanding of him a sign from heaven to test him. Okay, so the critics are back. They want Jesus to prove that he is the Messiah, okay, the Christ, as if he has not already been doing this 1,000 times over in the 7 chapters that we've been reading so far. Now, the difference is in this moment, they're not asking Jesus of an earthly miracle, like the healing of a person or something like that. They're demanding something that's like truly spectacular. It doesn't go into full detail, but one can think of when Elijah called fire down from heaven. Like they're asking him, if you really are the man, then prove it, okay? But it's another display of their notch of unbelief. Because true faith does not demand a sign. It trusts God's word for what it is, and it believes. Verse 12, sighing deeply in his spirit, he said, why does this generation demand a sign? Truly I tell you, no sign will be given to this generation. It really is heartbreaking to think about God's loving pursuit and labor for the nation of Israel for hundreds and thousands of years. Like, that's hard for us to even wrap our minds around. And now, standing in front of them is God in flesh. And they're so hard-hearted and spiritually blind to see it. Verse 13. Jesus left them, got back into the boat, and went to the other side. The disciples had forgotten to take bread. This just gets even, there's these guys. I'm just one of them, truly. The disciples had forgotten to take bread and only had one loaf with them in the boat. Then he gave them strict orders. Watch out! Seems like a strange transition. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Now, I just want to connect verse 16 to this. They were discussing among themselves that they did not have enough bread. Like, here's your sign, okay, so a couple of important things. The disciples have just seen Jesus feed thousands twice, okay? Now they get in the boat and they're stressed out because they forgot to bring enough food, okay? We don't know exactly their motive. Maybe the first time they, didn't take any of the special miracle bread that Jesus just manifested into reality, And then now this second time they've done it again, and maybe they all wanted like a crumb to put in a glass jar to I don't know what their motive was. Maybe it was just they didn't know when they're going to have their next meal. So we need to make sure we really pack and have enough. So regardless of their motive, the result is the same. They be stressing, okay? But then Mark mentions that they have one loaf, okay? So it's possible that they I don't know about you, but have you ever lost a loaf of bread in your pants? It's oh, I forgot. I have a loaf, I don't know that, oh, we found one in your bag or something like that. What's going on, okay? So it's possible that they found one and literally had some bread, but still were stressed out enough that it wasn't enough to feed them. Now, I will also say, I'm not going to say it's this, but it's possible that Mark is using some masterful wordplay. And he's referring to Jesus as the loaf. That he's referring to Jesus as the living bread. That they've got the bread with them. Okay? Now, I'm not saying it's that, but either way, why stress out when you have Jesus in the boat with you? That's the point, okay? Then Jesus drops this line about leaven. Where's our bread makers? Do we have any bread makers in the house? We got 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right. You're sourdough people and you name it. And there's a strange group of people, bread people. I respect you and love you, and I don't have the patience to do that. But so let me unpack this. Leaven, like yeast, causes dough to rise in a literal sense, okay? So in the ancient world, people would often keep back a piece of dough from the previous week, okay, so that they could continue to keep the fermentation process going. And they would add juices to it. They would add it to the new bread for this week, all that kind of stuff. But it was often, more often than not, a health hazard, okay? It literally and it so easily could become tainted. Here's the point. Leaven is so small, almost hidden, but can spread and infect everything and ruin all of things, okay? This past week, we were having lunch at the house, and my wife opened up a Diet Coke and poured about half of it in. The fizz goes up, and so she poured some of it and walked out of the room for maybe 60 seconds, okay? And I think she was feeding the kids some fried rice, and so she had the soy sauce out. And by the time she had got back in, Graham, our 3-year-old, had done what he does, and Kristen goes to take a drink. And there was why does this smell different? He had put a little soy sauce in her drink, But it wasn't a ton, it was just a little bit, But to her, it's whoa, everything has changed about my, drink experience right now. But it's but it's just a little bit. No, but it's infected the whole thing, okay? This is what Jesus is referring to. Okay? He is connecting this with false teaching. Anything that goes against who God is and His word and His truth. A little bit of false truth will sneak into our hearts and minds. Lies about God, lies about His truth, lies about who you are in Him can quickly spread and influence with damaging results. It's important for us to evaluate what false truth, potential lies that we currently believe or are tempted to believe. I started writing down some thoughts. Like, if we take our maybe personal or cultural view of different things, like, say, your view of dating, money, men, women, sex, politics, relationships, sin, happiness, submission to authority, family, God, the Bible, eternity, and we could just go on and on. Like, your view versus what God says about these things. Okay, what his standard is. Not just these things, but all things. Now, there's not many times that Jesus has like an exclamation point when he goes, "Watch out!" He says that in this moment. I mean, so this is important for us to zone in on, like why is he saying watch out? Now, I want to let this rattle you. I want it to like sneak into every nook and cranny of your heart and mind. Where are those things that don't align with God's standard? It would have rattled the disciples, and it needs to rattle us. Verse 16. I'll reread. They were discussing among themselves, they don't have enough bread. Verse 17. Aware of this, he said to them, I want you to notice all of the questions that Jesus asked. Why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Don't you understand or comprehend? Do you have hardened hearts? Do you have eyes and not see? Do you have ears and not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets full of leftovers did you collect? 12, they told him. When I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many baskets full of pieces did you collect? 7, they said. And he said to them, don't you understand yet? So Jesus jogs their memory. Even though they had ringside seats to these 2 incredible miracles, they have disconnected the events of which they witnessed firsthand with literally them not having enough food to fix lunch for 13 people. They've just disconnected those things. Even the numbers of leftovers are significant. You know, from a Jewish perspective, numbers represent ideas. So most of us have such Greek, Western influence that we only see numbers as like literal numbers. And even right now, you're like, no, it means 12. 12 means 12. That's the key. It's just a number, But for another culture, 12 was not just a number alone. It represented an idea. And for the Jewish nation, 12 meant the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's not just that fact, but what does that represent? It represents God's promise to bless the entire world. 7 is God's perfect number of wholeness and completeness. I mean, Jesus is doing some incredible things here. Now, all of these questions, you might be tempted to think, man, it sounds harsh. Jesus is like dropping the hammer on these guys. What sounds harsh is really a continued effort of not giving up on his disciples. He's not going to give up on them. Mark includes this next miracle to belabor the point. Look at verse 22. So they came to Bethsaida. They brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and brought him out of the village. Spitting on his eyes and laying hands on him, he asked him, do you see anything? He looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking. Again, Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes. The man looked intently, and his sight was restored. And he saw everything clearly. Then he sent him home, saying, don't even go into the village. So, question. Did Jesus not have the power to heal this man in like the first go? Like, what's going on here? Okay? I'm confident that Jesus did this, and we are given this miracle for us today to read. I'm confident that this happened for that man's benefit. We don't understand why Jesus took a two-step approach, but it was something that he obviously needed because Jesus meets needs perfectly. In addition, how cool God is, okay, we are reminded of the step-by-step understanding that the disciples were in. Oh, cool, Jesus fed everybody. Twice. Yeah, but like, we don't have lunch for 13 people. Jesus is like, do you like not get it, guys? I want you to see what's true. They're on this journey of understanding. It's not always super clear the first time, okay? Now, the rest of the chapter reveals more. Verse 27. Jesus went out with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the road he asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? They answered him, John the Baptist, others, Elijah, still others, one of the prophets. But you, he asked them, who do you say I am? Peter answered him, you are the Messiah. And he strictly warned them to tell no one about him. Now, back in our WWJD series, if you weren't here for that series, we actually took a deep dive into this moment of Caesarea Philippi. It was like the Las Vegas of the ancient world, pagan worship of the god Pan. They'd made sacrifices into a river that flowed out of a mountain. They literally thought of it as the gate of hell, okay? But Mark doesn't focus on any of those things. So the other gospel accounts give us that information. He focuses simply on the question of who is Jesus. And just as Jesus brought gradual sight to the blind man, he will now bring gradual spiritual sight to his disciples concerning who he is. I was a young lad of I don't know, like second, third grade or something. And I was driving in the car with my dad. And, you know, we didn't have like personal screens or stuff. We just stared out the window as kids, you know? We need a little bit more of that, but I'm not going to go there. And we're driving about an hour home from some meeting my dad had. And it's just he and I in the car, and it's just nighttime. And I'm a little kid, and I see what is something so confusing to me, like off way in the distance. And I start asking my dad, like, Dad, what? Do you see that? What is that? And he's just like, I don't know, son. What is it? And I'm like, my mind is just like going crazy. Like, are there aliens? You know, like and I'm just asking and some of you are like, what is he talking about? Guys, I had never processed in my entire life what like a city looks like from far away at nighttime. When you're out in the like sticks of Arkansas, okay, where there's like not city after city after city, but you're driving through just darkness and you see the lights of a city illuminating above the trees. I had no concept of what that was. And my dad played it up. He didn't tell me. And he just kept driving like, well, let's just find out, you know? And as we got closer and closer, and it like, there's such a slow fade of like, and we got to the city and I'm just like, there's no aliens here at all. Like, what's going on here, you know? And it finally hit me of like, oh, these are just the lights of this place. It was just this gradual understanding And maybe I remember it so clearly because my dad didn't just quickly tell me the answer, and I had to experience it, okay? These verses contain the most important question in human history. Truly. Who do you say Jesus is? It's an inescapable question. Everyone needs to answer. Now, Peter, in this moment, is the first to chime in and make the claim that Jesus, is actually the Messiah, the one promised since the first sin of our first mom and dad, and the one prophesied for generations, the one to come and redeem humanity, to fix what is broken, to right every wrong. Like, what a claim by Peter. But much like the blind man, not everything is perfect in the first step. Look at verse 31. Then he began to teach them that it was necessary for the Son of Man to suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes. Be killed and rise after 3 days. He spoke openly about this. Peter, the guy who just was like, "You're the Messiah! Woo!" took him aside and began to rebuke Jesus. But turning around and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are not thinking about God's concerns, but human concerns." So Jesus drops the first of 3 predictions about his death that we're going to see in this gospel account of Mark. And Peter was on board with Jesus as the Messiah, but he was not on board with Jesus going to the cross. Okay? He wants Jesus to have the crown without the cross. And Peter thinks that he has a better plan than God himself does. He wants Jesus to fit his agenda, okay? And guys, are we not guilty of doing this sometimes ourselves? I mean, I am so tempted so often to just say, give me a Jesus that I can control, One that's a little bit more like me than it is him, not so different. I would kind of prefer that sometimes. And the answer, like here, is no. We must learn and affirm God's ways, his plan, his agenda, his truth, not ours. Now, we may not fully understand it. I mean, per all this that we're getting this morning. It may not be easy or safe, but it will be best. In fact, it will be perfect. Look at verse 34. Calling the crowd along with his disciples, he said to them, huge moment from Jesus, "If anyone wants to follow me," man, what's he about to say? "Let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life because of me and the gospel, the good news, will save it. For what does it benefit someone to gain the whole world and yet lose his life? What can anyone give in exchange for his life? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man," he's speaking about himself, "will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." So we get the answer to our first question. What does it mean to be a fully devoted, committed Christian? A follower of Jesus? It's 3 things. 1, surrender yourself completely to Jesus. 2, identify with him in suffering and death. 3, follow him obediently wherever he asks you to go. I want to just make this as simple as possible. This is what it means. And out of the words of Jesus himself, this is what it means to be a fully committed Christian. And guys, there's tension in those things. Like a ton of tension. I don't want to surrender completely to Jesus. I want to keep a little bit of it, over here, and I want to hide some of this, and I want to not let Jesus have that part of my life. It's full commitment. I mean, identify with him in his suffering. Follow him obediently. Let me explain some more. If you live for yourself, Jesus is saying that you will lose yourself. But if you live for Jesus, you will find true life. And from our modern cultural point of view, losing yourself is wrong. Like our modern culture says, no, you be you completely, fully, okay? Whatever you feel, you do that, okay? But from this perspective, okay, this cultural, worldly perspective that has so much influence in our lives, there's a deep temptation inside of it to communicate that you are fine just the way that you are. Okay? That's ultimately what you're saying, that nothing is wrong with you. But this is a lie. Like leaven, it invades and confuses because we are sinful. We are not fine just the way that we are. We need Jesus because he's the only one that can fix what is broken in us. No amount of self-devotion, morality, good deeds, any of those things, okay, will do it. The world promises you glory today, in this lifetime. But the only thing that you will get is suffering. Jesus promises you a life like him that includes suffering, but in the end, glory. This is what it means to be a fully committed Christian. Now, does that mean that you're going to do this perfectly all the time? No, okay? Just like the disciples, okay, Jesus didn't give up on them. Like, look at me, he does not give up on you either. So if you hear all like the weight of this, and you're like, man, I could never do this perfectly, like, neither did they, or really neither has anyone, and yet Jesus continues to pursue. All Jesus has to work with is sinners. Like, that's it. And it's out of his deep devotion for his love, for his creation. You're made in the image of God, that he pursues you. And he loves you. And he does not give up on you. Remember the posture of the disciples, okay? Even though they kind of like botched it time and time again, the thing that I love, even though they didn't get it, like they never got out of the boat. Even later in the story when they like deny Jesus, when things get too hard, Jesus still pursues them. So, secondly, what stands in the way of you not being a fully devoted follower of Christ? This question is for the non-Christian. This question is for the Christian. Sometimes there's a temptation that we don't understand everything fully yet. So therefore I can't commit yet because I don't have it all figured out, okay? And that can stand in the way. Maybe it's like material or earthly concerns that you have, okay? You are not alone if you have earthly or material concerns, all right? Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's hurt or pain that you've experienced. Maybe you're tempted to find joy in something other than Jesus. Maybe it's worldly success that you're looking towards, or cultural ideas that cause tension with God's word and his standard. The world says this, but the Bible says this. Like, I don't know how to rectify that. Maybe it's the fact that you're actually scared to tell someone else about who Jesus is. You're scared to share your faith, and that's holding you back from being a fully devoted father. Guys, I could just keep coming up with ideas. There's so many things that cause us to stand, that stands in our way, that hinder us from being fully committed to Jesus. But in that, one, we're just unified together as a group of Christians and a group of maybe even non-Christians who are trying to figure that out. And if you are a Christian, there was a moment when you weren't, okay? And then now you have committed yourself. That doesn't mean that you're perfect. You're still on this journey of figuring things out. I'm going to ask that we spend a couple minutes right now asking that simple question. What stands in my way? And I just want you to be honest with yourself. I'm going to invite the worship team back up here. And I just want to ask you to pray. Be honest. Maybe you've never prayed before. Just talk to God. Admit that. Like, God, I don't know how to talk to you, but I'm just going to start talking to you. And this question's been asked of me, that what stands in my way of being committed to you? Well, it's a lot of things. Just be honest. Maybe you're here and you have been faithfully walking with Jesus for years. What's that next thing that he's calling you to? And there's something in the way of you doing that, of you moving in obedience to that. Let me pray first, and then I'm just going to ask you to spend a few minutes in prayer. Jesus, I just want to be the first to confess that there are so many things that stand in my way. So many temptations and worldly concerns and my own selfishness and my comfort. Lord, so many things stand in the way of me being committed fully to you. And it's honestly very embarrassing to be honest about that, because in my mind, I want to be committed to you, but when I'm honest, there's just a lot there. Lord, I pray for myself, I pray for our church family this morning, that we would be honest about those things. And I know some of us here are on this gradual step of learning more about you. And that is a beautiful process to be on, because that's the exact process all of us are on. And I pray that you would reveal yourself to us in mighty, mighty ways, just like you asked the disciples in this text. Lord, that we would be faithfully committed to you. We may not understand what this afternoon brings or the suffering that might come next week, but Lord, remind us of the perspective that all of that pales into comparison to having the pure relationship with you and the glory that you have promised us. Help us to fight the temptation to not want our glory now on this side of heaven, on this side of eternity, but trusting you that no matter what this world gives us, no matter what things that we experience, Lord, you have great promises for us, and you are the promise keeper. And so that's why we worship you today in spirit and truth. And so I just pray for our church family as they look to you and make this deeply, deeply personal.
Rock of ages, cleft for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy wounded side which flowed be of sin the double cure. Save from wrath and make me pure. Rock the labor of my hands can fulfill thy lost demands. Could my zeal no respite know? Could my tears forever flow? All for sin could not atone. Thou must save, and thou alone. Nothing in my hand I bring, simply to the cross I cling. Make it come to thee, fortress. Doubtless look to thee for grace. Fall I to the fountain fly. Wash me, Savior, or I die. For me, let me hide myself in thee. Wash me, Savior, or I die.
Suddenly articulate with 1,000 tongues to lift one Then from north to south and east to west, we'd hear Christ be magnified. Were the whole earth echoing his imminence, his name would burst from sea and sky, from rivers to the mountain tops, we'd hear Christ be magnified. And oh, Christ be magnified, let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me, and oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. When every creature finds its inmost melody, and every human heart is gaining cry, then in one enraptured hymn of praise, we'll sing Christ be magnified. Oh, Christ be magnified, let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified in the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. I won't bow down to idols, I'll stand strong and worship you. And if that puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice 'cause you're there too. I won't be for my feelings, I'll hold fast to what is true. If the cross brings transformation, then I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just the doorway into resurrection life. And if I join you in your suffering, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you